So in the previous chapter, we looked at compression and we started to understand that what compressors do is they change dynamic relationships between quietest and loudest moments within a sound. And to start with, it's really a good idea to explore the presets when it comes to compression to begin to get your head around what can be done with that particular tool. In this chapter, what we're going to do is to look very briefly at EQ, another absolutely staple effect, which is actually provided in a number of different ways within Logic. Now, the best way to start out with EQ, firstly, is to solo any sound that you want to apply EQ to so you can hear exactly what it's doing. And then actually, Logic makes this extremely straightforward. We can double click in this EQ pane here and instantly it will load up what's called the channel EQ, which is its kind of most comprehensive EQ tool available, and there are others which we'll see in just a moment. So what EQ allows you to do is to break a sound down into what we call its different frequency groups. Bass drums are very low and deep and bassy. Snare drums and claps are kind of more mid-rangey, and hi-hats are very fizzy and trebly. And on drum sounds, it's very easy to see how different components within a loop contribute to the overall picture of a sound. And I'll show you what I mean. If I press play, what we're going to see within the channel EQ is the kind of waveform of this sound represented in its different frequency groups. We'll see that the kick drum is down here, and we'll see that the clap within this loop is kind of more in this sort of area. And we'll see how the loop looks in terms of its frequencies when we press play. So you can see very clearly that the hi-hat area is here. If I sort of hover over the screen, we get this kind of snapshot of the waveform. And the area that I've got selected here is the hats, the claps are kind of in here, and then the kick drum is down here. So we can easily see how this loop is broken down in terms of its frequency content. And what EQ lets us do is to change the volume of different frequency groups. So if I wanted, for example, to make the hi-hats be a bit more present, a bit louder, but I didn't want to affect the volume of the bass drum, then I can do that here. Now, of course, it's really worth pointing out that if you just want to turn a sound up, if you just want it to be louder, EQ is not the tool for you. You can literally just use the fader down here in the bottom left-hand corner to turn the whole sound up. What EQ is going to let me do is to turn up or down the volume of different parts of the frequency spectrum, as we call it. So what I'm going to do is to come up here to the top end, and I'm going to just slightly lift this band. Now you can see that the band that I'm adjusting is purple, and it relates to this particular band here. We call this a high shelf. And what this does is to increase volume above a certain frequency, a certain point. Now, I don't need to know what these frequencies relate to exactly because I can see the waveform outlined as we heard it when we were auditioning the part a moment ago. So to know that I'm turning up the hi-hat, all I need to know is that that's what this little bit of a sort of fizzy top-end detail is. And now I know that I'm turning its volume up by boosting it. I can see the frequency that I'm adjusting here, and I can see how much I'm turning it up by here. Now, it's really worth saying that there is no hard and fast rule to how much is the right amount to change a particular band. A lot of people think that there's a sort of specific relationship or parameter change that I should make here, which will just make my drum sound perfect. That's not what signal processing is about at all. It's about you making creative choices. So I can press play and we can hear the difference between this high band being increased in volume, and we can hear that against the original just by toggling the bypass button on and off. So if I turn it off, we'll hear the original loop, and then I'm going to punch it in and we should hear a little bit more sparkle in the hi-hats. And sure enough, we can hear that really clearly. What I'm going to do is to add a second band. Over here, I can click and I can see this, this green dot, which relates to this particular frequency group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the volume of the kick drum. Now you can see that at the moment, the width of this band is really wide. In other words, if I turn this down a lot, I'm affecting frequencies, not just at the area where I'm dragging up and down, but all of these surrounding frequencies as well. And I don't really want to do that. What I want to do instead is to narrow this band down. And I can do that here with what we call the bandwidth control. You can see that as I adjust this bottom number, the band gets smaller. And of course, what I'm then in a position to do is to decide whether or not I do want to cut volume as I am right now, or whether or not I just want to boost it. So having adjusted the band width here, I can then decide which frequency I want to adjust. And what I'm going to do is just give a little bit more push to this kick drum, just turn it up a little bit more. Okay, so what I've done here is to make a sort of narrowish choice around the bass drum. I've made a much broader choice with the hi-hats, and the claps, which are in the middle, are not really being affected by what I've done at all. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that if you simply find yourself reaching for dials to turn up the kick drum and the clap and the hi-hats, probably you just want your loop to be louder, in which case you're much better off adjusting its volume over here. Remember, what EQ is for is to allow you to make volume offsets on a per frequency basis. So in other words, if you just want extra sparkle or extra weight in a sound, EQ is a really great resource to use. And Fader Pro is full of course content which is going to help you understand EQ better, including the intermediate course for Logic Pro. So if you're interested to find out more about EQ, definitely go there next. But it's also worth pointing out that the channel EQ isn't Logic's only EQ option. If I come down into the audio effects here, we can come into a whole EQ section, and what we're going to find here is a bunch of tools, including some fantastic vintage EQs, which kind of model the behavior of some of the most classic sort of consoles of all time. So if you want a sort of more vintage sound or want to experiment with EQ applied in a different way, be sure to check out the EQ folder of options there as well.